Hey there, duelists! My name is Dusty, and welcome to the start of our casual guide through the Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game. And we're breaking up our journey through the trading card game into a bunch of several different videos, including looking at all the different types of cards you can use to make up your deck, what you need to bring to a duel, and what a duel will look like. But first, before we get into any of all that stuff, we gotta talk about the cards. So we'll be starting off by talking about normal and effect monster cards, or just monster cards in general. So there are a lot of different types of categories that monsters could fall into, but it's kind of also easier to think about into if you divide them into just two different types of categories, and those are normal and effect monsters. So we're a little bit more into depth about these different types of monsters as we're going, and then about extra monsters and where they end up in your decks. But first, we kind of got to really talk about, well, how do you read a monster's card? So here we have a card art as well. It is Blue Eyes White Dragon, a very iconic Yu-Gi-Oh monster. He's one of my favorites. I'm even repping him on my shirt here. So let's get into how do we break down and reading a card. So first we've got the name of the card. Pretty simple, pretty standard, Blue Eyes White Dragon. Next to it, we've got this little symbol here, and this is what we call an attribute. There are 6 attributes that a monster can have. There is fire, water, earth, air, light, and dark. So this is essentially a monster's kind of elemental attribute. Now in Yu-Gi-Oh, there isn't a rock, paper, scissors mechanic similar to Pokemon, where like just because Blue Eyes is a light attribute monster, he can just kick ass against any dark monster, dark attribute monster. You can't do that unless there's like an effect coming into play, where like all light monsters can destroy all dark monsters or whatever, just like instantly, like by the start of battle phase, life points and defense points disregarded. So that doesn't really come into play at all. Attributes is just kind of another way of kind of dividing monsters into different subcategories or into different categories. Below those, we've got all these 8 little stars here, and that is a monster's level. I'll talk a little bit more about levels later on and what exactly these stars mean and how those come into play. But for now, all you need to know is that these stars determine a monster's level. After that, every card, be it monster, spell, or trap, is going to have a fancy bit of little art on it. I like the art of Yu-Gi-Oh a lot. I think it's really cool, and it's sometimes can be really beautiful, and also hold a lot of story into it as well. You get a lot of that when it comes to like your spells and trap cards. You get a little bit more lore as well, but even the monster cards themselves can contain a little bit of lore in them as well. Below that, we get into the card number. What this number really is just kind of another way of identifying the card for like collectors or I guess appraisers, and determining like where this card came from in like a pack, amongst a pack of cards, like booster cards or stuff, or like a structure deck or something. This card is numbered for that. It's essentially just a serial code. Lastly, below all of that, we've got the monster's type. Type is just another way of kind of, again, separating monsters into different categories. So it doesn't really come into play when you are in a battle. So there isn't, again, there's not that rock, paper, scissors attribute. Just because Blue Eyes White Dragon here is a dragon doesn't mean he's going to be able to defeat any type of like warrior monsters out there, or vice versa, unless there's like an effect coming into play. So type is just another way to do it. You'll notice on this one as well that also says normal, which kind of designates that Blue Eyes is a normal card. I've got another side that kind of compares normal and effect monsters again. Well, I'll just talk a little bit more about that. But essentially, just to give you a rough estimate, normal cards can't really do anything else special except for attack or defend. Below that, we get into our flavor text or the effect text. So when you get a normal card like Blue Eyes right here, you get a little bit of lore, just kind of flavor text, which is basically just words kind of describing what the monster is or kind of like who they are. And then if it was an effect monster, it would just be a paragraph or a line that tells you what kind of effect it is. I wish that you got a little bit of that flavor text in Yu-Gi-Oh as well, kind of like how Magic the Gathering does it, where they have like what that card does and then also its effect as well and a little bit of flavor text. So I really wish Yu-Gi-Oh kind of incorporated that into it. I think it would make it really a lot of fun to kind of like understand the quote-unquote lore some of the card archetypes have. But it is what it is. Lastly, we've got our attack and defense points. So Blue Eyes White Dragon here, he has 3,000 attack and 2,500 defense. Essentially what that means is that Blue Eyes, as a normal monster, can deal a lot of damage with his attack points, just to the opponent directly and to the opponent's other monsters. So attack really helps you determine on if you can destroy certain monsters or how much damage you can deal to your opponent. Defense really determines essentially how much your monster can defend against in terms of attacks. We'll talk a little bit more about attack and defense when we get into battling, but it's going to be way down the line once we talk about dueling. That's essentially what it is. Attack determines how much damage you can do. Defense determines on how much you can take. Next up, I've mentioned already, level kind of determines something special. So we've got two different cards here, both normal monsters. That doesn't really matter or anything, but they've each got two different levels. So when it comes to levels, biggest aspect that it comes into play is with summoning. So when you've got a monster that is low level, so 1 through 4, like Elemental Hero Evian here, that means I can summon that card from my hand without doing anything else. I can just place it from my hand, set it on the field. We'll touch on summoning again when we get into dueling, but this is essentially just kind of help you understand what levels mean or why they're important. And then, so like I said, again, just to reiterate, any monster level 1 through 4, I can take that card from my hand and summon it. But if it's a monster that is higher, so a 5 through 12, that monster has to be summoned in through tribute summoning. I'll touch on this again when we get into dueling, but just to kind of reiterate or just kind of help you understand summoning again, or just level plays. Tribute summoning is essentially you take a card, you replace a card with another card you send one card to the graveyard to summon another monster. Tribute summoning. So you're killing that monster, tributing to summon another monster, typically a higher level. So if it is a monster that is level 5 or 6, you only need one tribute to summon it. But if you're like Elemental Hero Neos here, and you're higher from 7 through 12, you're going to need 2 monsters to tribute summon. So I have to tribute 2 monsters, summon him. So that's where level comes into play, is if you can summon them normally or if you have to summon them by tribute summoning. Okay, so this kind of goes back into the main principle of what this whole video is about, and those are normal and effect monsters. Like I said, I like to think that essentially monsters can be broken down into if they are a normal monster or if they are an effect monster. Normal monsters can't really do anything but attack and defend, while your effect monsters like Beetle Trooper, Scout Buggy here can do more. So his effect is that he's able to summon a copy of himself from the deck or from the graveyard as kind of like a swarming technique, get more monsters out on the field. Effect monsters can have all sorts of different types of effects. And it's with effect monsters and normal monsters that we kind of can break those down into other separate categories. I tend to think of them more as different subcategories of effect monsters just because they tend to do more than just normal monsters. There are 2 of these monsters that we aren't going to talk about. There's 6 different types in general, but the 2 we aren't going to talk about are sync or tuners and pendulum monsters. I kind of reserved those to be included with our extra monsters just because they tend to do a lot more. I probably could have kept pendulums on here, but I just left pendulums with the extras just because they use the extra deck in a sense. I also left ritual monsters over there, but we'll talk about more of those when we get it. But for now, let's just focus on that there are 6 different subcategories that monsters can break into. We're only going to be talking about 4 here when it comes to effect and normal monsters. So our first one that we've got are Gemini monsters. What makes Gemini monsters so special is that they can be summoned as a normal monster first, which is what they always are, and then you can summon them again as an effect monster. So that's kind of how you can really kind of turn the cards on turn the tables on your opponent, is you kind of just start out with a normal monster, and then if they survive to your next turn, you can summon them again to have an effect. That's also kind of their downside, is that you have to wait to summon them again. You can't just summon them once and then summon them again as an effect monster. You have to wait until your next turn where you can use up your 1 normal summon again. I'll mention that again when we get to dueling. You're only allowed 1 normal summon per turn. So if I summon a Gemini monster once, I have to wait until the next turn again to summon him again as an effect monster. So that's the big downside of Gemini monsters. But again, what is a Gemini monster? They are a monster that starts out as a normal monster, and then you can summon them again as an effect monster. Next up, we've got Toon, Pegasus's favorite monsters. So Toon monsters, what really kind of makes them special is that by having the effect of Toon, they can just kind of gain extra benefits from cards like Toon Kingdom and Toon World, which allows them to like not be destroyed or something, or not take damage, or be able to attack directly. So that's what makes Toon monsters special in terms of like their extra added effect. Spirit monsters. Spirit monsters have a niche little effect that kind of makes them a double-edged sword, and that is at the end of your turn, a spirit monster will return to your hand. So that's a great way of protecting your monsters from being destroyed, but it also leaves your field wide open. So that's kind of the dangers of a spirit monster deck, is that once they return, like they leave your field to return at the end of your phase. Um, so that's kind of the big dangers of spirit monsters. There is a duelist in the anime that uses spirit monsters. We'll talk about him when we get to it. But yeah, so I think there's ways to make that return effect beneficial. It really just depends. I don't know. I don't use spirit monsters a lot. All right, union monsters. Union monsters are special because they essentially are a equip spell. We'll talk more about equip spells when we get to spells. So, but union monsters take kind of that place as a monster. So you can either add them, so you can equip them to a monster you have in your field to give them like extra attack points, or make them impervious to spells or effects or like damage. And then you can summon them again to your field as a monster to kind of help further boost your defenses or offenses. So that's really cool about union monsters. There are some that I've encountered that you can't equip them until after you summon them, but most of them you can just equip from your hand as an equip spell and then summon them again. So that's kind of the nice benefit of union monsters. So we've kind of touched on effects, on like kind of what they do. There's all sorts of different types of things. But with that, there are types of monster effects that a monster can have. These can look kind of similar to the effects we'll be talking about when it comes to um, spell and trap cards. But these are just kind of effects in general that are kind of really special towards monsters. And there are 5 categories of that, so we'll talk about those. First up, we've got continuous effects. Continuous effects are essentially effects that stay active as long as that monster is on the field. So Elemental Hero Heat here has an effect that for every Elemental Hero monster I control, he gains 200 attack points, including himself being on the field, which is an added benefit. And so that effect is just constantly playing. I don't have to activate it. I don't have to trigger it. Just by summoning Heat, he's out there cooking up a storm and getting attack points. So that's what a continuous effect is that it's continually activated until it is negated by another card. But that effect is constantly in play. You don't have to worry about triggering it. You don't have to worry about activating it. It is just super and ready to go continuously throughout your opponent's turn and throughout your turn until the end of the game or until that card is destroyed. Trigger effects. Trigger effects are going to be one that are going to be pretty common, but as the name states, they are just effects that are triggered by something happening. So like Clear Cube here, his trigger effect is that when he is destroyed, I'm able to summon a monster that mentions Clear World from my deck. So Clear Cube is triggered because when he's destroyed, his effect is activates. That is kind of a common effect where like a monster is attacked or is destroyed, it triggers an effect. But trigger effects can also happen like during the standby phase, during the battle phase, when you lose life points, when you gain life points. They can have when a monster is sent to the graveyard, when the monster is summoned to the field. Those are all different types of trigger effects. You did something to like specifically trigger that effect. There's another effect though that you do have to kind of activate, and those are what we call ignition effects. Ignition effects are effects that you can use at any point, but you have to activate them yourself. They aren't just activated or triggered by your opponent. They're not constantly going. They're not activated because you did something. You have to specifically activate them. And in those cases, especially with like XZ's monsters and other monsters, like number 62 Galaxy Eyes Prime Photon Dragon, they have an effect, and we'll talk a little bit more about this to XZs when we get into XZs, is that you have to detach a card to activate their effect, thus igniting it, and that's kind of what makes XZ's monsters kind of a good example of ignition monsters, because you're paying a cost to activate it. You don't always have to pay a cost to activate a monster's effect. You just kind of have to say, hey, I'm activating this effect. I'm doing this. But there are some monsters out there where you have to like discard a card, maybe pay life points, maybe draw a card, maybe return a card, and that's how you then activate that effect. So those are that's kind of like the downside of an ignition effect, is that you have to activate it, allowing your opponent to kind of trigger effect in response, or you have to pay something. But it really just depends on your cards. So make sure you're reading those cards nicely. Flip effects. So flip is both a type of monster, so a subcategory of monsters, and then it's also a type of effect. So the biggest thing about flip effects is that when a monster is flipped face up, that monster, you then activate that effect. So back up a little bit. So when you are summoning a monster, you can either place it face up in attack position, or you can set it face down in defense position. And when a monster is face down, nobody knows what it is except for you, okay? So your opponent doesn't know what the effect is, it doesn't know what type of monster it is, they don't know what type of defense it has. So that's kind of the nice benefit of flip monsters, that you can kind of play a little bit of mind games with your opponent here. And so flip effects are activated by flipping that monster face up into either attack position or defense position, depending on the monsters and like the phase and how it's activated. Flip effects can also be activated though when your opponent attacks that monster. So before your monster is, say, destroyed because they don't have enough defense points, as soon as that monster is flipped face up, that effect comes to active again, and then the monster is destroyed or whatever, you know. But you get a chance to activate that effect before that happens. If your face down monster is destroyed in any other way that isn't battle, it's not going to flip face up, which is a bit of a downside of it. Of flip effects is that maybe they have a card that just destroys all monsters on the field. You don't get a chance to activate that effect. The only time that a flip effect will activate, if you don't flip it up yourself, is if your opponent flips it up by a card effect or by attacking your monster. So that's kind of is the weakness of flip effects. And our last kind of category of effects that a monster can have are quick effects. Quick effects are effects that can happen at any time during either your opponent's turn or your turn. So Contrast Hero Chaos here is a great example of that. Even though it doesn't specifically say that it's a quick effect, the key words that we have here is once per turn during either player's turn, you can target one face-up card in the field and negate that effect until the end of the turn. So that's kind of what makes Contrast Hero Chaos a great quick effect example, because at any point during my turn or during my opponent's turn, so during their battle phase, during their main phase, as soon as they summon a monster, before they end their turn, which is kind of a waste of it, you can negate that effect of a monster on the field. So say they've got monsters, or they have a card on there that boosts the attack of all their monsters. I negate that card, their monsters are no longer boosted by that effect, which means they are no longer a threat to me when it comes to the battle phase. Then comes my turn again, I can negate that card again, and I can destroy their monsters. So that's kind of what makes quick effects dangerous and like powerful, is that they can happen at any time. A lot of cards, if they are a quick effect, will say quick effect, but there are some cards where you kind of just have to kind of read between the lines, like, okay, this is what it's saying. So that's why it's important to make sure that you're reading your cards and you understand what your cards say. But that about takes it for normal and effect monsters. Next time we're going to be talking about extra monsters. So that's going to include the two categories of monster types that I didn't talk about, and all the monsters that kind of reside are extra special. So that's going to be your ritual monsters and everything else as well. But we'll talk more about those for that next video. Feel free to leave a comment below about which of these monster types you kind of like the most, or if you have any kind of questions about monsters and effects that I won't be answering in the next video. Don't forget to like this video as well, and don't forget to attack that subscribe button so that when I upload you kind of see that video as well, and you can even flip that bell icon face up to get extra notified of when I upload a video. If you want to get a better edge against the meta, you can check out my Patreon and subscribe to that, where you get exclusive access to videos, early access to videos, you get bonus content like bloopers, behind the scenes stuff, and you also get your name in the credits. So again, thank you all so much for watching this video. If no one has told you in a while, you are loved and I am proud of you. Keep on rocking, rock stars. Love ya.